Reading this morning comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 20 through 22. 1 Corinthians 12, 20 through 22. But now indeed there are many members, yet one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. No, much rather, those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary.
You probably noticed that if you're aware of history at all, that we kind of tell time by wars. Because the planet changes when there's a battle or a war. That's how we kind of mark out things. Of course, other things happen. We'll say, "Oh yeah, that was before World War II," or "that was after," or "during." I find it interesting. You kind of tell time that way. There's some battles that kind of stick out in our minds more than others. There's some that occurred that people aren't even aware of, that kind of came and went, and they were, of course, important to the people at the time. But some kind of stick out better than others. I'm going to talk about one this morning, one particular battle, and most people would not be familiar with it, but it was a very strange battle and a very important one. It's in Exodus 17. And the Israelites are fighting a group called the Amalekites. And I think you'll agree it's kind of a strange battle, but it was also a very important one. We're going to find out what it has to do with us. And this is recorded for a reason. This is Exodus 17, starting with verse 8. Exodus chapter 17, verse 8. Then Amalek came and fought against Israel at Rephidim. So Moses said to Joshua, choose men for us and go out, fight against Amalek. Tomorrow I will station myself on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. Joshua did as Moses told him and fought against Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. So it came about when Moses held his hand up that Israel prevailed. And when he let his hand down, Amalek prevailed, but Moses' hands were heavy. Then they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, and Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side and one on the other. Thus his hands were steady until the sun set. So Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. First, I want to point out, so there's no confusion, because I'm sure you noticed there's a man, and his name is Hur, which is an odd name. For a man, especially in our English language, that can be kind of confusing. Probably not going to be mentioned as any modern baby name today. You're probably not going to name your boy Hur. But that's the name of this guy, and I want you to just kind of get that out of the way right away and notice that he's there. Second thing I want to draw attention to is the arrangement. Moses is standing above the situation. He's holding up his staff. We've seen this before. It's kind of similar to something we've seen before at the Red Sea. You probably remember that he also used the staff there to divide the Red Sea. And Joshua is down below with the troops, and they're fighting. And when Moses' hands are up, they're winning. But if he lets them drop, they start to lose. It's kind of an odd arrangement. And so it's pretty important that he keep his arms raised up. It's unusual, but it's pretty straightforward. However, it gets kind of complicated. This arrangement alone doesn't last too long. Moses' arms start getting tired, and it's harder than you think. I don't know if you've been in a situation, I've had to hold your arms out like this for some time. It gets pretty difficult pretty quick. So his arms start to drop, and Joshua and the troops begin to lose. So two people are added to the situation, Aaron, and that's his brother, of course, and this man named Hur, H-U-R. And they provide Moses with a place to sit down, and they stand on either side and hold up his arms. Because of all these things that are in place, Joshua and the soldiers fighting, Moses standing with the staff and his arms up, and Aaron and Hur holding up onto his arms, they win. That's how it plays out that day. I don't know if the Amalekites noticed. I thought about maybe from their perspective. I wonder if they noticed Moses up there and noticed that every time his arms start dropping, we start winning. I don't know if they even noticed him, if he was just kind of a footnote to them. But it probably would have looked strange if somebody knew what was going on, all the details of this. Not only was it strange, it was a pretty convoluted way to do things, if you think about it. So here's a question that might come to mind. Why? God didn't have to do it this way. In fact, when Moses used that same gesture and position at the Red Sea, that was not the arrangement at all. Dividing the ocean seems a lot harder than what was going on here. I'm convinced God could have arranged it. Raise your staff, the Amalekites drop, and then you're done for the day. So why did God make this arrangement? Seems from our human perspective to have some flaws in the system. The whole process took a while, and it seems like it has too many moving parts. Why would he arrange this kind of setup? I think one reason is found shortly later in Exodus 18. Shortly after this, Moses' father-in-law comes to visit. That's where we get the name Jethro. Probably know that more from a TV show than the Bible, but I was surprised when I found it in the Bible. Moses' father-in-law comes for a visit. He's bringing Moses' family to him. I don't know if you ever noticed this before, but Moses' wife and kids did not go with him when he went to break everybody out of Egypt, and they stayed with his wife's dad. And so he's bringing his wife and children. It's kind of a reunion, and also to kind of get everybody up to speed. And Jethro comes along, and he and Moses sit down to talk. This is Exodus 18, verse 8. So this is not long after this unusual battle that I just described. Exodus 18, verse 8, Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had befallen them on the journey, and how the Lord had delivered them. Jethro rejoiced over all the goodness which the Lord had done to Israel in delivering them from the hand of the Egyptians. So Moses updates Jethro. They get caught up. Next day, Moses goes back to work. It's kind of like when you go to visit relatives. You're kind of free and easy, but you have to get back to work. That your relatives might have to get back to work. So Jethro's kind of watching. He's watching Moses at work. And what happens is Moses sits down, and one person after another comes to Moses, and he settles arguments. That's essentially what's going on. Say, okay, you say this. Okay, you say this. Okay, here's the solution. And he judges different situations, and he teaches God's commands all day long. Jethro sees all this. And you can imagine, doesn't say it, but you can imagine him kind of shaking his head and pulling Moses aside. Exodus 18, verse 17. Moses' father-in-law said to him, "The thing that you are doing is not good. You will surely wear out both yourself and these people who are with you, for the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone." Moses was making a mistake a lot of us make, trying to do it by yourself. Jethro points out, he says, the task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. So Jethro comes up with this great idea. It's in Exodus 18:22. He says, train the other men to handle smaller issues. Here it is in Exodus 18, verse 22. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure. And all these people also will go to their place in peace. So Jethro told Moses something very important. Let other people help you. It's a new system. Moses sets up this system. He delegated. Others would handle the little stuff. He'd handle the bigger stuff. Very similar to the battle with the Amalekites. Moses had an assignment. On his own, it was too much for him. They had to give him a place to sit down. They had to hold his arms up. He needed help. That was something I think that Moses was trying to learn. It's hard for us to accept help. I don't know if it's in particular about our culture. Maybe in particular, maybe for males more than females. I don't know. Seems like guys in particular is like, nah, I got it. I'm fine. I've broken a lot of stuff. I've almost broken me several times trying to do it on my own. We had an old stove I was trying to get out of where we live, and there's a hill right next to this sidewalk outside our front door, and that was almost the end of me. It would have been a dumb way to die. It fell off the dolly, and it was a mess. Killed by a stove. But we tend to do that. We're kind of dumb when it comes to that. Say, no, I got to do it by myself, and we don't like to ask for help. In fact, I think it's probably easier that we would rather give the help than be the one asking for help. But you just can't do everything on your own. But going back to the battle with the Amalekites, why did God make this arrangement? Like I say, it seems you could improve this arrangement. Why have it take so long? And why all these moving parts? Why not just have Moses get up there and they're done? This showed Moses that he couldn't do things alone. It showed in order for things to work, it would require many people working together. I think that's what's going on. He says, you guys, you're going to have to work together here for this big plan to work. You'll notice something very important about the system. Everyone was necessary. Each of them played a vital part. If you removed Moses, of course, they would have lost the battle. But also, if you removed Joshua or the soldiers, they would have lost. Or the two men holding up Moses' arms, they would have lost the battle. It relied on numerous people working together. After the battle, Jethro showed up with Moses' family and the advice. So let's look at what happened before the battle. We're kind of using this battle as kind of the anchor point. We've looked at what happened after. I'm going to go back in time before the battle. I think it's worth noticing what happened just before in Exodus 17. And this might also shed some light as to what's going on that day. By the way, all this is happening between Egypt and Sinai. They're not even at the point where they get the commands of God. They've left Egypt. They've crossed the Red Sea. The manna has been set up. Then things took a dive in Exodus 17:1. Then all the congregation of the sons of Israel journeyed by stages from the wilderness of Sin according to the command of the Lord and camped at Rephidim. This is where the battle is going to take place, in Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. Therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water that we may drink." And Moses said to them, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord?" But the people thirsted there for water, and they grumbled against Moses and said, "Why now have you brought us up from Egypt, to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, saying, "What shall I do to this people? A little more and they will stone me." And the Lord said to Moses, "Pass before the people, and take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand your staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink." And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. This happened just before the battle. I don't know how much time, but it's at that location, and it's before the battle. And you probably noticed that as they traveled from Egypt, they were bickering all the time. Always on the verge of division. In Egypt, they weren't happy with the plan initially because it didn't go well when they first confronted Pharaoh. At the Red Sea, it looked like a dead end, and they were all panicking and ready to split up. And when there was no food, they kept complaining about how they had food back there. This group is always on the verge of splitting, of dividing, of fragmenting. And now there's no water. And instead of joining together to try to solve the problem, they fragment again. And here is when they ask a very important question. It's in verse 7. Exodus 17:7. Is the Lord among us or not? Is he with us or not? That's their question. And the answer, of course, is yes. You may recall people, Moses might be saying to them, the plagues in Egypt, the Red Sea opening up for you, the manna appearing out of nowhere, the water from the rock. And this will also be seen in the fight against the Amalekites. You see how beautiful this is? God takes his people who are constantly on the verge of breaking into pieces. So you know what? This battle, you're going to have to work together for this one. You're going to have to work together for this to pay off well. And they're going to see time and time again that the Lord is among them. But it seems like with this battle, God is trying to drive home another important lesson. The Lord is with you if all of you are with each other. Here's a group of people constantly on the verge of falling to pieces, and God puts them in a situation where they're forced to have unity or die. The unity is not just to make sure that things run smoother, it's for the sake of their survival. So, many generations later, God established another group of people called Christians. They're collectively known as the church. And at one point, he made a very significant analogy about them. It's in 1 Corinthians 12. We read part of this. Chris read part of this. We're going to look briefly at this. So God describes the church as a human body. It's 1 Corinthians 12, verse 12. "For even as the body is one and yet has many members, and yet all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free, and we were all made to drink of one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many." So when you're baptized, you become part of the body. That's what this says. And we're many individuals, but we're one body. And he uses this analogy to emphasize unity. He makes his point by telling us to imagine a ridiculous scenario in verse 15. The foot and the ear are rebelling. If the foot says, because I am not a hand, I am not a part of this body, it is not for this reason any the less a part of the body. And if the ear says, because I am not an eye, I am not part of the body, it is not for this reason any the less a part of the body. It's like someone saying, they don't need me. I'm not necessary. I don't serve any real purpose. That's just as ridiculous a perspective. But this happens when parts of the body compare themselves to other parts of the body. Then an even more ridiculous image. The whole body being an eye. That'd be an odd-looking person. Or the whole body being an ear. 1 Corinthians 12:17. If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole were hearing, where would the sense of smell be? And God explains everyone is different for a reason. They each serve a purpose. Verse 18. But now God has placed the members, each one of them, in the body just as he desired. This means every part is needed, and it's foolish for a body to think that some are indispensable. Verse 21. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you. Or again, the head to the feet, I have no need of you. Turns out, in fact, that the very people who seem the least important are indispensable. Verse 22, on the contrary, it is much truer that the members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. And the general idea is unity, and it means the body cares for every part. Here's the last part of this, verse 25, so that there may be no division in the body. That's what God wanted with Moses and the people, and also with us. But that the members may have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. And if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Even the most unnoticeable part of a body matters. And if you don't think your little toe matters, just drop a brick on it, and you'll discover the truth. Our situation, I would suggest, is a lot like the battle with the Amalekites. There's many moving parts. Each are necessary, but the key is God. The question they were asking, is God among us or not? The answer is, for us, is also yes. And it's seen in the collaboration. People relying on other people and being the ones being relied on. When you're baptized, you become part of this body, but in order to survive, you have to do two important things. You need to be ready to ask for help, and you need to be ready to give help. You don't get to just choose one. The battle gets overwhelming to all of us, and that means that you need help, but it also means someone needs your help. I think we forget that. Someone needs you. And it's like holding up one of Moses' arms. More than likely, eventually, you're going to find yourself needed for each position of that day at the battle. The one trying to hold your arms up, you might be there sometimes, or the one holding up someone's arms, or you might be out in the thick of it making most of the opportunity. Here's one more thing I want to share with you before we start wrapping this up. That's something that kind of struck me when I was looking at this analogy of the body. I had forgotten about this, and it comes to mind once in a while. Evolution suggests that the human body, happened over a period of a long period of time, over millions of years. And the result is impressive, but one argument is that there are certain parts of our body that are no longer of use to us. They're called vestigial organs. And the idea is that they just kind of got left over. They just didn't serve any purpose anymore, but they kind of hung out. In 1896, this guy came up with 86 vestigial organs. That number has severely dropped since then. Because since then we have found out that, your parathyroid and the pituitary gland actually are useful. But that was on the list. It's like, serves no purpose. Turns out that these vestigial organs are simply organs we haven't figured out a purpose for yet. The purpose is there. We just haven't discovered. I'll give you two quick examples. Your tailbone. You're always more familiar with that when you fall down. Evolutionists say, well, that's the useless leftover part of the tail that we all once had. Serious, that's why it's called the tailbone. But actually, several muscles are attached to it. It forms a kind of foundation and holds your organs in, which is a handy feature. It's fairly useful. The appendix, I'm sure, is probably the most notorious useless organ. In fact, it was considered to be so useless that in the 1900s, if a surgeon was working on you for other stuff, he'd be like, let's just get that out of there. And they would, even if there was nothing wrong with it, they'd just do the appendectomy. Last few years, they've discovered, surprise, surprise, it's a safe house for good bacteria. You probably know that your body depends on certain bacteria thriving in your body. Once in a while, your body needs to get rid of all that, and it replaces it with the good bacteria from your appendix. It's a safe house for bacteria. Now, you can get along without it, but it's not useless. It serves a very specific purpose. There is no such thing as a vestigial organ. You might be able to survive without it, but every part serves a purpose. I would also argue this. When it comes to the body of Christ, there are no vestigial organs either. The church can survive without you. It will survive without you. It'll survive without me. It's going to be fine. The kingdom is indestructible. But you have a specific part to play. You have a real purpose, not just for this congregation. Don't think I'm just talking about this congregation. I'm talking about the church. The effects, the choices you make will affect this congregation, but it will affect the church, the whole body, because you're part of that. You remove one person or add one person, it changes everything. I believe God arranges for people to cross each other's paths. We still have free will, but we get to decide what we do with these interactions. God's will is in play, and we play a part in that plan. And that means something very simple. You need people, and people need you. But just being a human being, you're going to only be able to accomplish so much. And if you rely on just human beings, they'll only be able to provide so much. You need someone who knows the truth, who belongs to the Creator, who knows how to get you safely out of here. You need a Christian. Those will be of the best use to you. That does not mean anybody is dispensable, but I'm just being straightforward. A Christian is your best bet. But these Christians also need you. And not just any version of you. They need the version of you that knows the truth, that belongs to the Creator, and that knows the only safe way out of here. Christians need your help. The battle's on, and you will change everything. The church is an amazing thing, and every person plays a part, and every person is vital. I know it sounds like something that people just say, that everybody's special. It's true. It changes everything if you're not part of this. We're getting, when I was getting ready for this, strangely enough, one person kind of stuck in my head, and that was this guy, the guy holding up one of Moses' arms. And I tried to find out more about him. I thought, well, maybe there's more about this guy. Couldn't find much. I did find out this is kind of neat. He was Caleb's son. That means his dad was one of the spies, one of the cool spies, one of the ones that did good and came back. And that means is part of this second generation. He's one of the few of this generation whose parents are still alive when it comes to the promised land. Seems pretty insignificant. And if you ask most people, what did do? First, they'd probably say, well, you have horrible grammar. But then they'd say, I don't have any idea. I've never heard of her. But we do know what he did. When it was needed, he held up Moses' arm, just one arm, for a little while. And it made all the difference in the world. As far as the battle plan, as far as I can tell, I don't think it was when they were laying out the blueprints and looking at the map, say, okay, you guys are the arm holders. Okay, you guys got to be ready. I don't think it was part of the plan. From what Scripture seems to indicate, it was kind of from the hip thinking. Moses was getting tired. And I don't think that was part of the plan I think was in the right time at the right place. And he saw what was needed to be done, and he did it. And it made all the difference in the world. That transformed him into something profound. It made him indispensable. When you're a Christian, it's important to remember you need us. But we need you. Things won't be the same without you. Your life won't be the same without us. Before we leave this morning, I'm going to encourage you to talk a little before you leave. That's what I love about this congregation is we all kind of chat before we leave. And I would encourage you to do that. Make sure that you're doing okay. Talk to somebody before you leave and make sure you're doing, and make sure somebody else is doing okay. Not just okay, but that they're right with God, that everything's all right, that we're safe and sound. That's what this is about. This isn't a club. It's not an organization. This is the body of Christ. If you have yet to be baptized, we want you to know what you need. You need to share in the resurrection of Jesus by being baptized. It's important for you to know we need you, but you need us. We need each other to survive. The task is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. But it takes that decision to belong to God. It's like Moses' father-in-law said. Maybe this would be a good way to close it. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure. And all these people also will go to their place in peace. Whatever your need is at this point, this is the right time, this is the right place. We'd like to encourage you to encourage us as we stand together and sing.